Test. Live on Twitch.
He's a gecko. Oh my gosh. He's a leopard spotted gecko or something like that. He's so cool. What are these?
Live on YouTube.
My name is Dale. Why does it have to be so wet? Why do you like the gecko? He likes it hot.
Okay.
Ew, she made it hot. How do you like that?
Hey, crunchy. Welcome to here.
Does he have strong teeth? Oh, don't play with that. Don't touch that. Do you like his fast? You know what?
Okay, we're gonna open up the club page here. Show folks on YouTube how it's done. You go to your Chess Dojo Club on chess.com. Here's the link of it, and then you just sort of scroll down the page a little bit, and there are the arenas. Friday night fights, classical chess. We're gonna be, we're gonna be changing the format pretty soon. So we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. It's going to be chaotic for the first 10-20 minutes here. I'll be running in and out, trying to encourage my kids to get into pajamas and stuff, and then bouncing back. And then eventually the tournament starts at 8 p.m. Pacific. That's in 20 minutes. And then I'll do commentary on the games, and I'll be truly with you. For now, we're just getting this announcement up, making sure folks know about the tournament. We've already got a few people in the under 1600 group, and B conquered up to 2300 this week. Wow.
I don't like them. Why'd you ask me if you're just going to give me
I think you were in the mid 2100s last week. 24 game win streak. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I guess other folks are going to be afraid of being number 25 at this point, but congratulations to you. That's just an incredible feeling. Oh, okay, the streak's already broken, so people don't need to be too afraid. You've played one draw. Nice. Wow. They're being quiet for 1 second, and it made me think I should post to Twitter that our tournament's starting. So say Chess Dojo Friday night fights starting soon on TV/Chess Dojo. Classical chess open to all, live commentary. All right. Since the 15th game, you've been trying to lose. I found that more difficult than winning used to be, huh? We do Sleepy Sounds. We also have faster controls. We have classical tournaments every week, and we have rapid tournaments every week. Yeah. But we're about to do some reorganizing of it, so maybe I'll mention that right now, and we'll talk about it more in detail later. I've been talking with, I've been hearing some comments and some feedback here and there from people on stream, and we've also been talking about it with Kostya and Jesse and other people on the dojo team, and we're thinking that it might make more sense to move classical chess to a Saturday or Sunday time slot when we currently do a rapid tournament, and then have Friday night be kind of a chiller event like rapid or blitz. So I would think mostly rapid, since that's what we've done in the past, but we could also throw in some blitz or bullet or something crazy. Hey, good morning, Martin. Yeah, so basically we're thinking of flipping that. And ouh, ça a l'air beau. Tu vas le manger ou c'est pour moi? C'est pour toi? Ok, très bien. Quoi? T'as changé d'avis, t'avais déjà deux? Ok. Je vais te dire merci alors. Parce que j'apprécie, c'est très gentil de toi de partager ça avec moi. C'est délicieux, d'accord. So, I don't know how many folks here participate in either the Chess Dojo Round Robins or the Chess Dojo Open Classical. But basically, we'll run the classical 24-hour arena. And there'll be a certain time slot where we do commentary, like there is now. And then on top of that, what we'll do is we'll tell folks in the Open Classical and in the Round Robin that they're invited to schedule their games during that time if they want their game to be commented. And then they can just send the link to Kostya and I, to Kostya and me, and one of us will do commentary. And Kostya and I will trade off on the weekend time slot. So you can just send the link to your game to both of us once your game starts, if you want us to comment on it live. So we'll kind of combine that, and for folks who aren't in those tournaments and just want to play a drop-in game or two, we'll have the 24-hour arena going as now. So, hey, gefilte fish. How are you doing? Just let me win 2 BGM. Yeah, sounds reasonable. Just let me win 2. Let's fix this screen just a moment in case I have to run off. This will be live coverage of Friday Night Fights. Do it like that. I don't know.
No tapping. We talked about it. You don't think it disturbs the crickets?
Okay, so that looks okay if I need to run away for a moment. 5 a.m. Woo! Is that normal for you to get up so early?
What's the issue?
It's moving. She died of moving.
We are lizard sitting a friend's gecko, so there's an exciting display here in the room tonight.
Would you like something to do like the rest of your pizza?
Classical is fun, but it's not that fun, is it? I mean, for some people, it's the most fun thing there is, Be Concord. Depends on the person. For me, it's very fun.
Cheese left, really? You won't eat.
Est-ce qu'il a encore faim?
I think so.
Tu veux sortir le pain pour un moment pour lui? Peut-être?
Isn't this his slice right here that's like mostly not eaten?
The one that's almost full is Lily's, and the one that's more of like a crust is his.
Oh, I ate some of his.
There you go, you have yours now. Lupin!
That is unfortunate, Be Concord. That is.
You want some of this, Lupin?
I'm gonna grab a cup of water.
Want some of this? Cheesy bread.
I love it. I love it.
Vous pouvez le réchauffer pour un moment. Zed, attention.
Leave it, Papa. Leave it, Papa. It's so much mess. Should I take the bottle away now? Really well done. Ship it in the fridge for tomorrow. It's not yucky. It got everything over here covered in milk. Okay, Zillian, you need to be careful. Oh, we sit down and eat grapes. We do not run around eating grapes.
Si ça tombe et que papa les saisisse, C'est poisonneux.
No, it's also she's gonna choke on it if she's running around. Sit down.
Ah, ça c'est sa choix si elle veut mourir. Hein.
No.
Qu'est-ce qu'on y
Lily,
fait?
spit out the grapes now. Take them out of your mouth.
Faire plusieurs dans la bouche en même temps, c'est dangereux.
You can chew them well. You can't have grapes. You're not gonna show us your big. Responsible. Can you leave your pajamas?
Ay, ay, ay. Hey Marshall, the games haven't started yet. The tournament starts in 11 minutes.
Do you want something to eat or do you want an ouch?
So we'll see.
I think we're gonna be all done with the grapes.
We'll see how many we've got once the tournament actually starts.
Come on.
No.
Let's go read our book. Let's go look at our list of things. We can pick what we're gonna do.
Ah, excellent water. Excellent
He's going to
water.
sleep now. Good night, Jacko.
Okay.
It's going in house.
In the house.
And we just have to turn the light off.
It goes off automatically as long as you don't touch the button.
For sure, Crunchy Crunchy. We should get some more players.
She was touching
Yeah.
the button and turning on and off the light, so
So I should go check that's the right intensity for the temperature, right?
it's correct.
Yeah.
She touched it, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll adjust it.
You have to have a big, a tiny house and a big house.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep. Baby had turned up that heat lamp. That was gonna be a crispy cooked gecko in a moment there. Where's Prue's shirt? Here's my shirt. Oh, Waldo. Ha ha ha. You know, stripes aren't such a weird thing in other parts of the world. It doesn't necessarily mean Waldo. This shirt is called a marinière. It is a normal shirt in Normandy. Yeah, I've gotten it a few times, unfortunately, now that I'm back in the States. All right, so what do we got, folks? We need one or two more players in these tournaments. So come on down and get a game, right? Boom. There's an arena for under 1600s, folks, on YouTube. If I can, I'll try and send you a link for people over 1600. I don't know if I can. We'll see. Copy a link. Here's the arena for people over 1600. Whoops. All right, we got a fourth person. Lord Scuba enters the arena. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. We should get a few more. We got 10 minutes. There's plenty of time to go. Let's look at B. Concord's position while we're waiting. I don't like to do nothing for 20 minutes, so let's grab this Fen here. And we'll go learn, analysis. All right, Jamin.
I see a big spider in the bath.
Whoa, une grande araignée, hein?
Yeah. Because Ruben don't like spiders.
Mm-hmm.
Can I see it? Show me the bath. I want to go see it. I see a spider and a big spider, then it goes in the bath. Can I see? No, it's gone. Oh, well, just show me what.
The tournament's actually designed to play one game, because one classical game can take a couple hours, right? So this arena, it lasts 24 hours so that people in different time zones can get a chance to get in a game, right? Like people can wake up in Sweden and play a game, and then a few hours later people can wake up in Brazil and get a game, etc., right? Throughout the day. But yeah, one classical game is plenty. It's not really designed for somebody to play as many games as they can and try to win the arena. It's not really set up as an arena in that sense. I mean, that's how you set it up on chess.com, but that's not the goal. So Concord, you were white. Your opponent has this pawn on e3, and I guess you're saying did not win. This game you tried to lose more than others. So c4, you would have played knight a1, I suppose. Doesn't look good for you. I'll give you that. But, you know, there's still pieces on the board, you know. Black went rook d f8. Oh, no. They hung the knight. Attack the f-pawn some more. Maybe they're planning a knight sack on f4, although they could already get 2 pawns on f4. I don't know. Maybe they just... I don't know. I don't know. There's not always a good reason. Not always a good reason. All right, Majestic Waterfall. We got a 1300 in here for you. That would be a good pairing. Let me check 1600 plus if we've made it to 4 players over there. Oh, still waiting for 1 player in the 1600 plus. Competition be conquered. They were doing the competition with you. What else should we do while we wait for the games? Actually, we've only got 5 minutes. We should tell the players over 1600 to join, right? The pairings are based on ratings. So you get paired with the person closest to in rating who's available. That's the priority of the system. So it'll pair number 1 with number 2, number 3 with number 4, etc. Yeah. Because I don't really expect people to play multiple games, so I don't really care how many points they have. I don't think anyone's going to try to, you know, get the most games in and, you know, play 5 games in a classical arena or something. All right, over 1600, we need 1 more player. 1 more player over 1600. Hurry on in before it's too late. And we get ourselves canceled. Untitled Rex, yes. Thanks for joining, friend. So now we're set. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Tu veux de l'aide pour les sortir? Tu sais ce que c'est qu'une mitaine? These are the current tournaments. Yeah, just the wrong date. We can switch the date. Oh, no. This is the right date. You probably could become Resolute. You just have to practice for a bit. You could start out bad and then gradually get good. Oh, Martin's in the tournament. Let me see. 44045. And if I go fight here, 440 4449045. Yeah, it's the right link. Yeah. Oh, crunchy, crunchy, crunchy. Your pairing might get changed. That's right. If you speak English, the easiest foreign languages to learn are French and German, because of the formula that Be Conquered just provided. You know how like if you don't know the word for something, like you don't know the word for train station, you could be like a train station, right? Just try and like pronounce it French. And there's like a chance you'd have the right word. Well, it turns out it's almost a 50% chance that you'll have the right word if you just pronounce an English word with a French accent. But if you know German, or vice versa, if you know French trying to learn German, right? You can just check if the word is the same, right? So you're like, moon in German is Mond. Okay, so it's not going to be le moon en français, right? So you can't just sort of guess a cognate and change the pronunciation. There are a few words where it's the same in all three languages, like school, school, école, Schule, escuela, kind of the same in all the languages. Hey, KV Budayan Jind, I can find you a link to the Dojo Classical Open. The October one, you might be too late to join. That might be your problem, right? That might have started last week. I don't know exactly when it did, but basically in Chess Dojo, you go to tournaments, and if you want to go to the Open Classical, there's the link. And yeah, it looks like you can't join because they're already into their second round. Right? But what you can always do is you can always put yourself on a waiting list for a round robin. Yeah. Should you listen to the commentary while playing? No. We're all expected to mute the commentary while playing. Oh yeah, let me make that announcement because the games are starting in 30 seconds. Okay? So, everybody who's going to play, we wish you great luck. Have fun. Make sure you're at your keyboard ready to play. Sometimes chess.com will forfeit you if you don't make your first move in like 30 seconds or 10 seconds or something like that. But also, as far as the commentary, it will be saved. It will be recorded. There will be a video on demand you can watch later for the commentary. So if you're playing, mute the commentary, close the commentary, try and monotask. Just focus on your games. And we are off. Good luck, everybody. Have fun. Let's open up some fights. For those of us who aren't fighting tonight, we get to watch and hopefully be entertained by it. Whoa, Be Conquered. With 1 second to go, Chess Lebanese Salah joined us. And that's going to be a big fight for Be Conquered because Salah is really strong. Let's see. We've got Just Let Me Win versus Derdev. Playing a Bishop's opening. Jesse's aggressive repertoire is where I learned that opening for the first time in my life. And Untitled Rex playing the English opening against Göteborges, who, having trained for a month, I know is a somewhat expert on the English. I shouldn't exaggerate how much of an expert because actually Göteborges, Martin, plays lots of different openings. So he's a bit of an expert on it, but that's not to say that he doesn't play all kinds of other things quite well also. So, the next one, Budayan, will probably be in 6 weeks. It'll be early, maybe first week of December, something like that. Typically, one starts every 2 months as far as the Open Classicals. I don't know if there's some way to join with half-point buys or not. I'm not sure. And by the way, to anybody wondering, as you drift in, you're always allowed to join these arenas late. We got them kicked off. If you join late, it may take you a moment to find a game. But looks like Neforolian, for example, just joined and immediately got thrown into a game with Nguyen Evan. And we get the orangutan, or maybe Sokolsky is the Soviet name for this b4 opening. Pawn trade here. This position is a very, very unusual position to play very close to equal. So it's a kind of opening where if you have some experience with it, you could do very well because it's pretty unusual and interesting. It is starting chess. Yeah, Martin got up very early and he's playing. For you and me, it's kind of late, and for him, it's really early. Sokolovsky, maybe? Could be gefilte fish, could be. I was really not confident on that. Sokolovsky. What does chess.com call it? Polish opening. Kucharkovsky Maybaum Gambit. Nonsense. This is just the main line of b4. I guess I have heard it called Polish as well at some point, but this Kucharkovsky Maybaum Gambit is silly. It's not even a gambit, right? They traded pawns. That's not a gambit. All right. The under 1600 group should also be off. Normally I look at their games first, but let's see what kind of opening Salah and Be Conquered are up to. English, very, very mainline English, c4, e5, a reversed dragon, or accelerated dragon, really. And I really like this position from the white side. But very, very strong GMs play this with black with no trouble. You know, clean, good positional players. I think generally they retreat the knight to b6 here to avoid knight takes e5 kind of tactics. Let it go, let it go. Our littlest one plays us 4 hours of Frozen soundtrack per day. Approximate average. And that's not exaggerating. That's not like saying that 35 minutes feels like 4 hours. That's probably about how long it is. You cannot play a Yugoslav attack as black DM because you just don't have the time to set it up. You know, like in this position, white's basically threatening knight e5. You don't have the time to get this pawn here and this bishop here and the queen out of the way and castle over on this side. There's just no time as black when you're down a tempo. So the Yugoslav attack only specifically works with the tempo that white has. Yeah. I mean, you can try and use the general pattern in some other openings as well, right? Like, particularly with white, you could say that what's called the English attack against the Najdorf is sometimes a little similar to the Yugoslav attack, and that f3, bishop e3, g4 stuff is a pretty standard attacking setup in the Sicilian period. But yeah, here, let me show you some specific problems with it, DM Stewart, and also hi to Icy and hi to Viral and gefilte fish with those words I never, ever hear at home, and I'm just dying to hear. You are correct. Music to my ears. So let's look at the situation for a second, DM Stewart. Let's say black wanted to set up this attack with here, here, and here, right? But they're sort of down a tempo compared to being white. If they play bishop here to support this knight, then white can play d4 very quickly here. If they play f6, white can play d4 very quickly here. And the center comes apart before black has a chance to get the king out of the center. Wait, Viral Stigma, you live in the same town as Chess Lebanese Salah? You guys play each other in real life? That is so cool. Okay, so then the other thing you could do is you try and take control of d4 with the bishop, right? Hoping to then play f6, bishop here, etc., right? 2 towns over. Then white's got this center fork trick because we haven't yet played f6. And so knight takes d4. And again, black center is falling apart. There's no time to set up the Yugoslav attack. Does that make sense right there? DM, like, there's no way to get in all these moves that we want in time without white somehow landing something in the center. Yeah, definitely worth asking. To some extent, any question you have other than can we play is worth asking. You know, I'm teasing, Stewie. But if you look at the title of the show or you listen to what's going on for a minute before interjecting yourself into the proceedings, yeah, then you can see that there's something going on, right? And that you can answer your own question on that one, right? 1 second. Tu cherches le pain. Sauce associée là, mais fais attention à tes pyjamas avec la sauce. Oui, où est-ce que tu veux? Juste direct sur tes trucs. C'est un peu des deux. Qu'elle est déjà brisée. Oui, elle est craquée, sois gentil. Ok, sorry, we're back. Oui. Yeah, Marshall, a 1,000 rated player won't necessarily know the best way to capitalize on all these things. I was just giving DM Stewart the sort of official answer, you know. You can try and get away with these openings against a lower rated player who won't know to go for this d4 break. But eventually you'll face somebody who does do it, and then you'll need a new opening variation. Which is okay, you know. Okay. Okay, so we got bishop e7, knight c3, castles. Inviting knight takes e5, knight c3, knight c6, knight d1, knight d8. Isn't this just a blunder? B Conquer just plays calm d4. All right, so knight e5. If black takes on e5, you can take on d5. You're up a pawn. This is an important set of captures to be able to calculate. This is really, really critical, I would say, at a 16 to 1800 level to get good at these captures. Don't do it with arrows, by the way. I'm just doing it because I'm on stream with captures. Captures, whites up a pawn, captures, whites up a pawn, or if we get rid of the rook moves, knight b2, knight b7, whites up a pawn, knight f2, knight b7, whites up a pawn. I think black just hung a pawn. I'm not calculating like, this is my real calculation, would be like this and just silence and just, but I could do that for 5 seconds and confirm for you if black hung a pawn and white didn't take it. Sometimes people don't calculate well the first few minutes. They're still warming up and they're just playing vague, loose moves. Quoi?
I wanted it with tomato sauce because I don't like the things inside of it, but I can still taste them.
Ok, tu n'es pas obligé de le manger si tu n'aimes pas.
I'm still hungry.
Ok.
I heard something going on. Maybe I could do something myself if I can judge it.
95, 93, 96, 92. '92 check is less clear. Okay, I guess white can play knight e5, knight c3, knight c6, knight e2, queen e2, bc6, rook e1, attacking the bishop before playing bishop c6. Now rook e8, there's bishop takes c6, attacking both rooks, right? So black has to spend a tempo with the bishop, which won't be too effective, something like bishop f6. And then white can play bishop takes c6, rook b8, and then there's pressure on b2, enough to keep white from really being ahead. Or white could just play d3, not take on c6. Rook b8, rook b8. But then there's bishop a6. That's not such an easy advantage for white. You kind of win the pawn, but black more or less gets full counterplay. Interesting. Okay, so maybe they didn't blunder it at all. So white plays d4, counters the center, trades. White's got the better center here. Black looking for pressure against that center pawn immediately. And that's their live position. So white's kind of looking between e3 and bishop b2 mainly, I would think, to hold this pawn, which is under fire and can't move. Now, we've now got a bunch of games going in here. 1, 2, 3. And let's open up the under 1600 group as well. Check some of these games. So, under 1600. PLNR already won their game? Wow. They've been playing a lot lately. They're in a second game here. Nice. Looks very interesting against Habits. Chouchou, si tu ne manges pas, il faudrait se coucher. Alors quoi? Il y a la pizza là sur le comptoir, tu peux en prendre. Ou il y a des raisins là, mais il faut manger ou se coucher, pas de livre à cette heure-ci. Let's see quickly how they got here, just approximately. We don't have to understand every detail about it, but they started with Morphy versus Duke and Count opening. The threat of checkmate on f7, knight h6. Ooh, doesn't white have a crushing move here? The knight is defending the key checkmate and you could trade it off? Oh, little bit of a missed chance for white, maybe. At first, white's got the better position in this opening, right? You saw the black knights, not the best placed off here to the side. White with an extra pawn in the middle of the board. Castled first, ready for action. Knight g4 from black. Hey, Marshall, that's a good question. Approximately, what's your rating on wherever you play? You know, let me know if it's, you know, chess.com or Lichess or German Chess Federation or whatever. We have done classical every Friday for the last 2 years, Bakalman. We are going to swap time slots between our rapid and our classical very soon, I believe. Hasn't been finalized yet, but it's probably changing really soon. So we'll talk about that more in a second. But a good start to the game for white. But in this position, black played knight g4. And actually, even though it's moving the knight a bunch of times, it's kind of threatening to come to e5, capture that pawn, attack the queen, attack the bishop, and regain the pawn and be a really good piece on this square. So right here after knight g4, white needed to look for like a good fighting move, you know, to not let black achieve their plan. But what white did was kick the knight to where it wanted to go, right? So the knight wins back the pawn, chases the queen off. Could also maybe have traded this bishop off. And this catches up with the live game. So black's just played d5, an explosive move. But black should be more careful here. White's castled, black's not. You explode the center and trade pawns. It's not going to favor your king. Additionally, white just played a3 attacking your knight. Now, I mean, you've got a really powerful position with a lot of energy. You can strike back at the opponent, play counter threats, ignore what they're doing sometimes. That's very advanced stuff, but you can do that sometimes. Here, as black, you're kind of on the back foot. White's better in development and safer king, so you don't want to start a fight. Basically, you want to have a sense of when starting a fight is likely to be good for you or not good for you, right? And here as black, you should feel that you're trying to catch up and get your king out of the way rather than you're trying to, you know, press your advantage by exploding the opponent. So d5 is the wrong idea, and white could potentially punish this in one or two ways. PLNR took the piece on b4, which is pretty good. And habits kicks the knight, which at least stops white from doing the other devastating move, which white could have played here, which would be pawn takes pawn, opening up the queen on the knight and the king. So white had two powerful moves and found one of the two, or chose one of the two. And black at least didn't let the second shoe drop as well. Tournament, if you're done playing, you can absolutely unmute the stream. Well, I can't tell you that by voice since you're not listening. Yes, Tournament. If you're not playing, you can definitely listen. Acrylic. If there's a 1220 and a 600 plus division, it's probably because they couldn't read the name of the tournament. Marshall, when you tell me what level you're at, I'll give you a real answer to your question. Let's talk about Bakelman's question for a moment while we wait. Bakelman asks, classical every Friday. So we've been doing this Friday night fights for over 2 years now, I think, consistently, week upon week. You know, maybe missing 1 or 2 weeks out of every 52. So we've been doing pretty good at keeping it consistent. Long ago, Coasty and Jesse, one of the first shows that they did on Chess Dojo was called maybe Sunday Night Fights or Saturday Night Fights. It was a weekend show similar to this. I tried to kind of replicate it and bring that feeling back by setting up Friday Night Fights. And I liked that Friday and Fight were both with Fs. That's how I picked what night it was at. And I was trying to, echo their legacy. Ooh, look at that. A fighting move from PLNR. Not retreating the knight to a bad square, instead bringing out a new piece and counterattacking this piece. But Habits dodges very nicely with a not just an escape, but a counter threat. And now White finds themselves under 2 threats. So was Bishop F4 too aggressive? Let's see, right? Could be risky here. So Bakuman, so I put the classical on Friday night, trying to copy what Jesse and Coast had been doing 5 years ago at the start of Dojo. And then I put the rapid tournament. That's just too loud. 1 second. I saw one of them just come wandering through, confused. And then also I had been doing these weekend rapid tournaments for a long time, so I kept those going as a tradition. But I've been talking about it with Coasty and Jesse and some other people, and I think it might make more sense to have our classical on a Saturday or Sunday morning and rapid chess or blitz chess on Friday night, which we have also done at one point. Scotty was running a blitz tournament on Friday nights for a while. So I think we might flip that pretty soon. I don't know if there would be I don't know if we have a central way of putting out an announcement that everybody will be aware of in advance before it happens, but let's just say this is my general warning to everyone that a change is afoot. Change could happen anytime now. Okay, so then did anybody see a way to save these 2 pieces? I didn't really. Did PLNR find anything? Not yet. Looking deep, trying to find it, which is good. Now, PLNR had reason to feel like they could play fighting moves here because they're ahead in development, right? Compared to Black. 1 tempo for the king out of the way, an extra bishop in the game, rook in the game, right? So White could be looking for a fighting move. Even still, it's not always easy to ignore threats and just fight, right? Just because you think you're ahead. After knight g6, White's going to lose one or both of those pieces here, right? So it looks like, despite how strong White's position is, they probably just had to play some kind of a retreating move here. Something unglorious. I'll be back. I'm sorry.
They're annoying.
I know. All right. Let's see. Knight takes f4. Queen takes f7. Wow, white just got way too aggressive. Way too aggressive. Ay, ay, ay. Oh, welcome back, Bucklemon. Welcome back. How did the team fare in the Coach Champs tourney? I had one less player than the others, unfortunately. So we were a bit handicapped, and I had 3 players. One of them did pretty well on the second day. One of them did great on the third day. And the third, had a mildly disappointing result, maybe. But, he played fine. The other people just played better. But, from like a performance of the team perspective, right? We had one good score, one great score, and one bad score, so to speak. Add them all up, and the team finished in 6th place out of 8, which is not great, but again, three players. I think one of the other coaches also only had 3 players, so that was unfortunate for them. I imagine they're probably one of the coaches who finished 7th or 8th. I don't know who it was. But like my team's performance was pretty average over 3 people. Like if you extrapolate their scores to a 4th player, my players scored about 50% overall over 3 tournaments. So it would not have been a dominating performance in any case, like we would have maybe been the 4th best team potentially if I'd had a 4th student, but that also depends on whether I would have had enough time to do the work for 4 students, because I really did use like all the time I had, so I probably couldn't have quite. Wow, white keeps going with the aggressive moves, and material keeps dropping. Over aggression here from white on this board for sure. You see the sequence of moves where white's making threats and it's just not working out, right? We threats in f7, but f7's defended. We take it anyway. Ooh, that drops another bishop, right? g3 attacking the knight. No, that drops the pawn. f4 chasing the knight. Drops another pawn, right? At some point, these threats are not working. There we go. Capturing something of the opponents instead of chasing their pieces around. That's going to be a stronger move for white. But this endgame is going to be a real challenge for white because they are behind now. Black still has some development to finish up here, Oh, and look, black gets too cocky. They start fighting, making threats. All white has to do is move the rook, and this move becomes pointless. You see what I mean? It's sort of like an empty threat. You need your position to be strong enough that you can make threats that your opponent has a hard time dealing with. Or there's an art to making threats that improve your pieces or force their pieces to worse squares. But these kind of random threats, this rook might be better on d1 or f2 than it was on f1, right? So these kind of random threats are really, really detrimental, actually, to one's own position. I've ingested a hair from one of the kids when I was putting him to bed. It's kind of gross, I guess. Or just bothersome to have this feeling in my throat. And white saves the rook. And now black's just got to move the knight again, right? Part of it is the knight's on a better square here than here. So the only reason you play a move like knight d2 is if you're winning something, right? You just have to move the knight away. Oh, this is a sneaky threat here. That's pretty clever. If white keeps chasing, then white's going to suffer with knight e3. So white has to think, I like chasing your piece, but where am I chasing it to, right? Gotta pay attention to that. This would actually be a reason why if white predicted where the black knight might go, the rook f2 move would have actually, I guess, been better than the rook d1 move. Because these pieces are not arranged for a knight fork. Right now you wouldn't care about this move. Now we do care about it. White's played a move. Rook a7. Grabbing a pawn, but does black see the fork? That's a huge move if black finds it. Ooh, they don't. They develop a new piece, which I want to give them a lot of credit for, but attacks and threats come even above development, folks. Just counting what pieces can take what pieces is above development. Here, knight e3 winning a rook is the best move for black, and bishop b4 allowing rook b7 check, attacking your bishop and king. You're walking into bad squares for your own pieces, right? Where you're at risk. And one thing I notice is Habit's, much less experience with the time usage compared to PLNR, right? Using 15 minutes less time, you're like never going to outplay an opponent and win a game using that much less time than them. It's just not going to happen. And to Courtney's point earlier, having understudies for the coaching competition kind of event could maybe help, but the players are selected in a draft, right? So if you had a second pick in the draft and then your player didn't want to participate, you kind of deserve a kind of good player. If you have like a sixth pick in a draft, then you kind of deserve like a less good player, but it's hard to say by how much. And like drafting, each coach has an equal access to some extent to the players and to picking who they want. So, there's not an easy answer to it all. Last chance for Habits to find the check, and they do! Slowed down for a moment on one move and caught sight of this. And Habits might be able to win the game. I know I said that players almost never win using so much less time than their opponents. Almost never. But that's a really huge piece to grab. Acrylic, generally I focus more on the lower rated games at first and then move more into the higher rated games over the course of the evening, because the higher rated games, first of all, they're playing 90-30 instead of 45-30, so their games are much longer. And then a lot of like beginners don't use their time, so their games are done in 45-60 minutes, whereas the 600 pluses are going to play 4-hour games. So I get you get a lot of action in these games very quickly, and then you move into the higher rated games afterwards. I don't like to do the same formula again and again, but that one seems to make a lot of sense. So Zoomjaw has a suggestion, maybe the tournament format could have been a little bit slower, then you'd have less blunders. Sure. You would. Depends on what you're trying to do. And yeah, you could extend the tournament over more days. Could be fun. But I think that a big piece of the piece blundering, a big factor, right, Zoomjaw, in the piece blunder, I think, even more than time control, was nerves. Now, having more time would help players to settle their nerves, less games to play in a day, more chance to recover. But I think a lot of the people in this tournament had never before played on stream in like a competition. And so I think nerves were a huge factor. I noticed two really, really strong players who I had previously thought were basically favorites in the top two sections had really tough events. I think maybe pressure got to them. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these players have never played OTB before, probably. Well, some of them have played a little bit of OTB. But yeah, big stage, thousands of people. You know, playing on chess.com's stream in a competition is different than playing on your own stream. Some of them are streamers, but they might stream, you know, blitz games at home while listening to music against another 1,200 while 15 people watch, you know, or 20 people watch, and they're friendly people who they know and they interact with in chat. That's totally different than a couple thousand people on chess.com who you don't know watching. So, yeah, 2 cameras, people watching, commenting. Maybe for some people, representing your coaches could be something that makes you nervous. I think all of that was a lot to handle. So, I don't know if they could listen to music while they played. Maybe they could have. Oh, another huge fork with the pawn. But then forgets to capture the knight. A wasted fork. Now White can take the rook or give another check and then save the knight. I would probably go for the rook, huh? There are some other games in this section. Let's see what else we got. A modern defense. So black lets white start off with a better part of the center. I don't know what they're doing, Tournament. I don't know what to say. Yeah, there's a bunch of 1900s in here. I don't know why. To me, the situation is pretty clear and obvious. Like who's supposed to be in what section and what the idea is. But all right, so PLNR went for the rook. Habits now took the knight. Pawn drops, pawn drops. Black still has 1 extra knight. It's not the biggest the lead's been, but the way has been cleared for a pretty strong passed pawn. So it's pretty hard for PLNR to put up great resistance right here. As white, we'll see if they can come up with anything still. Thinking about it here. Allowing that knight e3 check fork was really devastating, and they allowed it for a couple moves. Habits didn't find it on the very first opportunity, but eventually did. Here we got Lord Scuba really using a lot of their time. They're just barely out of the opening and have used half an hour. So this is something that may seem surprising after what we've seen on the other board, but this is somebody playing relative like too slowly in classical, right? You have to save some time for your middle game, some time for your end game, etc. Oh, cool, Sumjai. Glad to hear it. Very glad to hear it. What do we think of the position? The black bishop here is not very good. White has some space. The black king position is a little bit a little bit weakened by these moves. I don't know if black's pinning their hopes on capturing this pawn. Viral was saying just go all the way home to defend your pawn. Yeah. I could imagine that white could maybe play something like this. And if bishop takes, maybe you can make this work. Threatening checkmate. Queen e7 or rook f7, right? And this. I guess it's knight f6. And white doesn't have enough. You mean the reasoning behind why a coach is coaching in a certain way, Zoom John? What if we played a very simple move here for white? Bishop h6. Idea here, 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 here. This looks like a tremendous counterplay or, you know, attacking potential for a pawn. Tremendous potential to my eye. Yeah, I wouldn't know who has the advantage here, but my instinct's kind of telling me I'd rather play white. One thing is, if white's better, they might be winning. If black's better, they're sort of slightly better. So that's one reason why, if you don't know for sure who's better here, and you have to pick which side, you might pick white. So Stigma says knight g5 looks crushing with the idea of making a sack here, I guess. I was also thinking that white could play queen c3 check next. I played rook d1 first so the knight can't block. So I think this move looks strong as well. And I was even thinking knight or queen d6 might really make life hard for black. Oh, here's the bad news for black. If queen e7, getting off the line of the rook, queen c7. This is really paralytic. Very hard for black to move here. Very hard. I'd originally had this idea of maybe knight d6, threatening knight f5 check and kind of just sinking in. But this queen c7 idea is much stronger. It's really hard for black to play after that move. White's got to be much better at this point. Gotcha, Courtney. Sorry about that. Sorry about ads. I hate them myself. If I knew how to turn them off, I would. Icy saying maybe queen a5 could avoid queen c3 check and deal with this. Could be. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. No refutation. No refutation, but I still feel like I kind of like white. Yeah, as far as I can calculate b4, you can take it. But I don't know. Knight d6 and queen d6 both look interesting or appealing, right? Preventing knight f6 because we'll trade and take the rook. And with the idea of maybe playing b4 next. And just kind of, you know, again, trying to freeze things for black. I saw this move queen e5 as a possible move, and then I thought maybe white keeps going in like this, saving the possibility of moving the knight with a discovery. Threatening rook d7, threatening knight d6, knight c8. It's hard for me to imagine that white wouldn't have a good position, honestly, yeah. So, all that to say, I think it's plausible for white to leave the pawn on d4 hanging. You know, against a strong opponent, you definitely worry. You potentially do some double checking. You're looking at some lines, trying to ask yourself, can I sack a pawn here? And white did spend some time, but they chose this square, which I don't really see why. Black plays knight b6. White's going to keep that bishop. And black is not interested in winning a pawn. They just want to improve these pieces. And I got to say, instinctively, I can't really blame black for not going for a pawn. It's very risky feeling. Hey, Martin, did your game finish? Yeah, finished a game with Untitled Rex. Cool. E5. Whoa. Okay, they want to get this bishop out. But, I mean, you could have had that pawn for free. Instead, you trade it. White should be comfortable. Oh, I forgot. I wanted white to play bishop g5 here, by the way, folks, instead of bishop d2. Oh, now some fighting gets started. The pawns are engaged on d4 and e5, and white now kicks that knight with c4. Really, the bishop's angry about it. But we'll see what the intended follow-up is for white, if there's some good reason for this. I don't know what happened to your game, Tournament. Sorry. Knight f4. Okay, forward. Forward. Iran won't be bullied. Sure, if you like, Martin. It's open. It's free. Everyone can play as much or as little as they want to. You know, as little as 0 games, as much as, I don't know, 10 games or something crazy like that. Alright, forward goes black with the knight. White could trade it or try trading the pawn, or I suppose the pawn's not going to take now that the knight's here, so white could also leave all this tension and do something else. But the move white most wants to play in general, rook opposite the queen and fighting the center, is really bad because of bishop g4. So it's just out. So that means, what are we doing for white? Maybe bishop b4. Okay, white plays a trade. That makes a lot of sense. Simple option. Trade off that piece and then deal with this pawn. Maybe just push it and try and claim the pawns a little bit strong. If you put the rook here, you still have to calculate this. Probably it works out for white. You're not even down a pawn. Yeah. Okay, so rook d1 and d5 both look good to me. White takes the pawn. And my concern with this move might be queen b4, rook d1, queen b2. Again, white just won a pawn on f4, so if black takes back on d4, it's just a trade. It's not a huge risk from white. Not dramatic amounts of material, but I don't see a clear follow-up. That's true. It's become so quiet here. This is reasonable to try it, right? You get this pawn, you attack that piece, and you're not that far away from trying to anchor this bishop somewhere and defend the king. Queen b6 just got played. That attacks the bishop, the pawn, and the pawn. So black still might intend to win a pawn with this move, depending on what white does about the bishop. Not much time for Lord Scuba. Tough position for both sides, for sure. Rook e3 is possible, using a rook lift to defend the bishop. Queen could drop back to f3 or g3. Still no easy solution. White goes for the knight, defending the bishop. I thought bishop d4 would be strong, but the knight got out of the way of the defense. Wow. Black scrambles for some threat there. I mean, the move that might win would be rook d8, looking to take on d4. But it's risky to move this piece away from the king. Your instinct would be to bring this piece out and then this one. Queen b4. The queen tries to do it all herself. I don't see a threat on this move. All right, black picks a pawn, and the rook can't burst into the game without offering the bishop. So black's taking advantage of this bishop that's not anchored by a pawn, that's not defended, it's kind of boxed in, and using it to restrict the white pieces. Knight d3, that'll chase her. Now, to my mind, if black sees queen d4, that's a clear solution to what's going on here, right? You centralize the queen, offer that trade, looking great for Iran. One second. blue at least I know is trying to be good. Whoa, excuse me, it's very tight to get in here. Tradeovich, rook gets out. Rook defends the pawn to free up the bishop. Looking for some pressure. This move looks great for black, though. Bishop f5, right? Hell of a drug, Jesse would even say for that move. That's a real move. But black played a little fancy a-pawn move. And now there's some pressure. Now they find that move. Is it soon enough? You never know when you need to, just, bustle along with your development, or when it's time to do some important fancy positional something, make a weakness so you can win the endgame later, blah, 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 something fancy. You never know. But rook e7 looks like, wow, that's, some real pressure starting to come in. But bishop f5, going after this, I think the rook has to move to defend the knight. Something like this, maybe bishop c4. Let me change MoveBot to say October 12th. Bishop f5 is annoying. How do you keep something going for white? I mean, you can't just give a piece. I guess you just have to play rook d1 quickly and hope it's okay. I don't think you can be too much more choosy than that as white here. We don't have the ingredients to be sacking pieces in this endgame, so we just have to defend our piece. Well, Viral thinks that white will be fine. Black's not forced to trade on d3, Viral, but I didn't even think that this was very good for white. Just getting the rook attacked here. But actually, maybe it's enough to just go back and forth like this. If black ever moves this, you take here. Black ever moves this one, you can take here. And you're threatening to double. So it's not so easy for black. So rook d1, played by Scuba. Black takes, white takes. Oh, we're getting this position. Wow. Rook c7. Nice, Scuba. Okay, made good use of that time they were thinking. On rook d1, came with the whole plan. Rook e8 played. Back rank mate threat. You got to attend to that before you take this pawn. Maybe Black's going to try rook e7. h4, yep. That does allow check, king here, bishop takes pawn. It'd be more solid to play g3. Definitely more solid. Rook e2. Not bad. Black getting active. But if you wanted that pawn, it was more effective to check and then take with the bishop. Here, weirdly, after the bishop moves somewhere, if you take on f2 with the rook, the king moves away and you don't really have a follow-up. If you take with the bishop, then after king f1, you're a little tangled. I guess best is to take with the rook, so you don't get tangled at least, and you defend your weak underbelly at f7. Yeah. I'd expect something like bishop c4. Is there anything fancy for white I'm not thinking of? I guess that there was the issue though with the bishop there after rook takes, king here, rook here. It's both. Nice play by Ira on these last couple of moves, folks. Just abandoning the pawn on b7 to get this guy active. Look at this. Looks like Black's under a lot of pressure despite being up 2 pawns. This rook's defending this rook's defending that. And white's threatening second rook to d7. Honestly, it looks grim. Then rook e8, rook e2. And not clear what white should do. Maybe this move was a consideration as well. King f1 instead of g3 or h4 prevents rook e2 for a bit. Black can play bishop b4 to maybe force it through. But now the bishop's at least off of here, right? That gives white some more time to figure something out. You go bishop c5, rook f3 is in time. So that was definitely a big thought here. King f1 as well as, you know, making a luft with the pawns. Yeah, that might have been actually much better. The king move, trying to keep that rook from getting so active, because now it doesn't look easy for white to handle that rook. So black says, forget about my b7 pawn. That's not how I'm winning this game. I'm going to get the pieces active, maybe get ahead 1 or 2 pawns on the king side and hold f7 so that I'm not completely tied down to this pressure. Bishop b3 played, not c4 because of rook f2, f4, I think. That's the right move, but man, that's a hard one to find. Props to Lord Scuba. Black takes with the bishop. I would have taken with the rook, pretty sure. King attacks the pieces, and hopefully black had a plan for this. But this looks like a big mistake for black, this bishop f2. Big mistake. Played in seconds, by the way, folks. Played in seconds. Check here. And the point is, you can't back up because you lose the bishop. You can't bring out more pieces and coordinate them because of the bishop here. And if you move over this way, white attacks your bishop in f7 with good counterplay for white. But bishop b6, maybe rook b7, and you've got too much stuff hanging. Oh, black's going to give check on f2. Okay. Very clever. Sounds like a really interesting topic, Zoomja. Who wrote the course? And have you studied enough of it to start to have an opinion on whether you like it? Rook f7 might win, suggests Icy Stun. Rook f7, rook f2 check, you can take the rook, so there's no rook f2. Moves like rook b7, rook f2 are not 100% clear. Probably winning, actually. I think rook b7 might be winning too. But rook f7 looks interesting. We've got a move. King e2 played. Now it's definitely not winning for white. They're down 3 pawns, scrambling for a draw. So big missed opportunity here. Not a lot of time for Lord Scuba, but rook f7 is hard to see, but very strong. Rook b7 is, I would say, easy to see. They attack your piece, you know, you move and counterattack theirs. You're always looking for moves like that in positions where lots of pieces are, you know, getting attacked and undefended, right? You're always looking for the moves where you move an attacked piece and create a new threat. So, oh, it's by John Kabadai. Oh, that's super zoomed, huh? You think rook f2 is winning for black? It's hard to imagine black winning this position here. Well, no, not hard to imagine. It's possible. But I'm not going to get mated, am I? You're just going to try and get your pieces out of the way in time. Good night, Courtney. Catch you next time. Actually, black may have a clever move here. Here I was thinking, you know, good counterplay for white. Rook e3. Maybe refuting it. Oh, Viral Sigma has like a simple idea as well. Rook d8. Rook d8 may be less convincing in this line. Though I frankly admit I didn't see rook d8, and I should, obviously, I should. The problem with the bishop b4 mate. Oh, I see the idea with bishop b4 mate. I was thinking the problem was here taking this rook. Oh yeah, it is a problem. I was right. I see it as a problem because now this rook's not here. There's no mate. Yeah, bishop f7. It's a good threat. I mean, that's strong pressure there. Okay, let's get back to the game position. So white misses rook b7, rook f7, and goes for king e2, which looks fairly tough for white. Uh-oh, rook e8 check. Hello. Black was under 1 threat. They throw an in-between move that puts them under 2 threats. This would be correct, folks. Just save your piece that's attacked, right? It's funny because, you know, players rated 500 or 600. One of the things that I mentioned as sort of a stage of chess development that they haven't achieved yet is the thing where instead of defending a threat, you look for counter threats, or maybe I can ignore this and continue doing what I think is important, right? Like a 500-600, you attack their piece, they just move it away. But, you know, somewhere between, depends on the player, but a realization comes at some point. You know, let's say somewhere between 1,000 and 1,600, depending on the player, where 1,000 would be quite early and 1,600 would be quite late. But at some point, you got a realization that when they attack something of yours, you could save it, or you could counterattack something of theirs, right? And that's like a legal move as well. So, such as this position here, white attacks the rook. Instead of running away with the rook, you also have the option of making a counterattack, right? But at first, when people learn this idea, they're kind of out of control with it, right? I mean, look at this rook e8 check. Ugh, right? King moves. And now, if you save your bishop, there's bishop f7, right? So you, like this move, rook e8, you're actively losing the game by not avoiding your opponent's threats in the simplest way. So when people first learn that concept that you can kind of skirmish, you can fight back, they'll often really, really overuse it. I guess White was careful here, right? Because White thought a little bit and did not step onto the d file, which would have allowed these pieces to save themselves. Even with king f3, it's possible to go rook c8 to not lose all the pieces, right? Black didn't find it. You could go rook c8, but even still, you know, rook here has hurt Black's chances of winning dramatically, right? Dramatically. So rook d8 is good. Oh my god, and back to f8? Oh, Dabo, that's crazy. And if White took here, there's rook here? Did Black see all that or get lucky? That's incredible. That is a genius move. That's not possible. What Korchnoi would say is that move is too good for you. If you came up with that in a post-mortem. You say you're not allowed to use moves that good because you're not good enough to see them. So you can't claim your position is good because of that move. But dang, that's an amazing move. Wow. No way around it. Dang. And now we get the king and pawn ending, and Black is still up a pawn. And in a king and pawn ending, a single pawn is better than two in an opposite colored bishop ending. This looks really good. Korchnoi did not take losses well, Steve Nash. Or, I mean, he didn't take losses in the traditional sense of good sportsmanship well. I mean, you could say that he took them well from the perspective of something about how he took them caused him to work on his chess and become a great player, right? He was a top player for maybe the longest. Yeah, I mean, he and Smyslov would be two modern candidates for greatest longevity of a top player. Of course, if you look at a longer historical perspective, Dabo, you have to say that Philidor was actually still the #1 player in the world at an age where, you know, Smyslov was number 10 and Korchnoi was, yeah, I don't know, number 20 or something. Smyslov made the candidates at age 64, I think. So he was basically playing like a top 10 player at age 64. Korchnoi was still like a grandmaster at age 80. I mean, you keep the title forever, but he was still playing like a grandmaster at age 80. Was he still top 10 in his 60s? I don't know. But yeah, players with like the most obvious longevity story, I would say Philidor would actually be the top of them. Then you have to consider Emanuel Lasker. How old would Lasker have been in 1924 when he won the New York International ahead of Capablanca and Aljechin? I mean, he won the World Championship in 1895, I want to say, as like a 25-year-old. So if that were right, he'd be born around 1870. So he'd be 54 years old and have been among the top 3 players in the world and even won a tournament ahead of the top 2 players. So he would be up there in the conversation. Was Lasker avoiding Capablanca? In a match for a long time, yes. But in the New York 1924 International, he was not avoiding him in tournaments. And then Smyslov and Korchnoi. Those are the 4 big names that come to mind for me in terms of longevity. And honestly, it might be Philidor number 1, then Lasker number 2, then Smyslov number 3, then Korchnoi number 4. Out of those 4. But that said, that's from oldest to newest, meaning Philidor had the least competition, right? The least competition. And then Lasker the next least competition, etc. And Korchnoi like really, really top competition. Smyslov as well. So harder to maintain your skills or your overall world level of play into old age. It depends on how many good players there are. So it definitely is tougher and tougher and tougher to be that amazing, long-lived championship level player. White putting up some fight here. Any player right now, asked Dabo. Aronian's too young to be in that kind of a conversation. I think Aronian's like, I don't know, 42 or something like that. We're talking 60, 70 years old to be in this conversation. And, very few players keep playing at that age right now. Very, very few. From the past generation, Shirov and Ivanchuk are still playing pretty decently and pretty actively, but they're not, top 10 or top 20 players. Shirov nor Ivanchuk is going to make the candidates. And I think they're still 10 years younger than Smyslov was. Anand's getting close to that age, but he's not playing Icy Stun, right? He plays like 3 games in the Bundesliga per year. That's not really playing. I don't have a lot of experience reading books by PDF. In general, I really like to have an actual book. But I've been reading some literature books on on an app. And it's fine. It's like 10% less fun or less, I don't know. I mean, if I could save $150, yeah. Or, 140 or 130 or whatever the difference is, should be fine with a PDF or a digital book. And then, yeah, as Dabo said, I mean, Anand, it's hard to know what his level is because he plays very little. He did just lose a match to Kasparov, who's completely retired. Player's doing a fancy corresponding squares defense here from Lord Scuba. If white ever goes king c5, black has king c7 with the advantage, but black wants to be able to play king c7 without white playing king c5. Why in this position would black not play c5? Because of this, right? Then you have to go here. Here, here. Now you take the opposition, but the white king's further up than yours. So you force them this way, you come here. If they come here, you can't flank them because they're further ahead. So it's still a draw. Seems like black can't win here. If black had a win, you'd think it would be here maybe, right? With this idea, In this position, there's one try here. That doesn't work because of this move. Queening with check. If king goes this way, you win the race. I think black wins this position here. So c5 should win right here. I think, right? What else could white do? They've got this tempo, but the tempo's irrelevant because we can do this. And if we ever get this far forward, we're just winning simply. So when I play c5, that's white's only chance to mess with me. This is the only line black has to calculate is king b5, and it wins for black. Let's have computer confirmation. Nailed it. Let's look up here. c5 is the winning move. Huh. Still got the king and pawn endings. Okay, so what happened in the game? They came back around to this position and white backed off instead of going king b5. Wow. Third time around, Iran came around with the king to d6 and did play c5. And Viral Stigma thinks there could be another way to win this endgame from the very beginning, which is to go to the king side. So here, here, and then here, here. That does look like an obvious win, Viral Stigma. Let me double check it for you, okay? c5, g4, c6, h4, b5, g3, a5, g2, king b6, h4, a5, h3, a6, h2, a7, h1, a8, queen check, possibly a draw. c5, g4, king c6, h4, king g4, king g3, king a5, king g2, king b6. Black's one move faster, but the king has to be on g2 to queen, so your queen doesn't guard a8. One other possibility: king c5, g5 takes, king c6, king, king's on g2 again. It's a draw. I'm sorry, Viral. It was a very good solution. It should normally work. You should normally be right. But to me here, the only winning line was king c5, c5. Which Iran found after like 10 moves of trying to triangulate here. Here's the game. You see this attempt at triangulating takes a while, doesn't really do it. Gets back to a position he had earlier. Plays c5 this time. Now black's fast enough, although this is not the safest way to do it. If your opponent backs up this way, you don't need to calculate a race. If they give you this much territory, play king c4, king b4, king a4. Do not, like... Yes, you should be able to calculate king and pawn races. I recommend you be able to do that. You know, it's basically like step, 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 step. There's a couple different ways to do it. You could visualize moving the pieces. The technique, one of the techniques that often works is to just count the moves. So you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 moves for black to queen, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 moves for white to queen. And then you're like, I need 8 moves, they need 10 moves. Okay, I'll go for it. That's very doable. It's a good skill to have, but honestly, maybe practice it in a puzzle at some point in a game. If you can play king c4, king b4, there's a certain practicality to not calculating long variations when you can win without any calculation. You know? How do I remember all the squares? How long does it take to visualize them? So I don't visualize them. How do I remember them? I just spent so much of my life on the squares that I just know them now. All right. And Iran takes down the king and pawn ending. after a lengthy battle. Bravo to them. Now, let's check out some games in the 1600 plus section, right? Now that we've spent over an hour down here. GG, Lord Scuba. We saw so much of your game. Yeah, watch the VOD. That's my tip. Watch the VOD. We watched very, very, very much of your game. I didn't double check myself, Viral Stigma, so there's a small chance I was wrong, yeah. You're gonna miss having the 3,000 plus rating. I think the rating inflation was disastrous and should have been addressed ages ago. It's just useless to have ratings that mean nothing. I haven't read what they've done or why and how big an effect it's gonna have, so I don't have any comment on how well they did it or whatever. Marshall, you asked the question earlier, right, about solving tactics or puzzles but not being able to find similar tactics in your games or missing them and how to improve on that. And I had a follow-up question for you before I could answer that question, which was, what's your current level, like rating level? If you would like an answer to your question, I'd be glad to give it. I just need to know where you're at. They pretty much want it to be close to your rapid rating. That would be great, ZJ. On average. I mean, it should have a variance, right? To show, on average, it should be the same. But there should be some players who are higher or lower, then they know whether or not to work on their tactics or not. You didn't disappoint us, Lord Scuba. You used your time very well. You played a great, interesting game. And if you want some tips, I recorded an hour of tips for you. Or not exactly, all just tips for you, but, stuff that you can, my thoughts, which you can compare with your thoughts and get something out of. So Chess Lebanese Salah is considering this bishop b1 move. It allows rook c7. Then I guess the king can never get out of checks, huh? Because the bishop covers these squares, even if it's pinned and doomed. There's no way for the white rook to ever get around and defend this piece. So the piece is dead, but it keeps the black king from successfully approaching this rook and chasing it away, I think. Look. Tremendous, no? Incredible. So, in other words, Salah is no longer considering bishop b1. They figured out long ago that it doesn't suffice to beat white. Is there any move to stop rook c7, though? That is my rating. Marshall, I don't see what is your rating. I just see the comment, that is my rating, David, at this point, and it doesn't have a rating number in it. Hey, Courtney. You have trouble finding the tournament link, huh? Yeah, it is late now. The tournament links should be findable through the Chess Dojo Club on chess.com. Which is this link here. Normally you can find them. There will be an area for upcoming events. This is where they appear until 8 p.m. Once they've started, then you find them under current events. So there's upcoming and current. Yeah. The problem with bishop b1 icy, as I see it, is that white has a draw by repetition with rook c7, rook c8, rook c7, rook c8. The king can't approach and stop the rook from checking him because this doomed bishop is still covering these two squares. And if the king tries to get out at h6, there's rook h7 check. Seems really actually just kind of clear, nothing else. 1675 USCF, 1765 rapid. Okay, great, Marshall. So to have that rating, Marshall, I'm going to assume that you've got a pretty good knowledge of tactical patterns. I assume black's playing to win icy stun because they've got 3 pawns against 1. But if there's no way for black to defend these 2 pawns from rook c7, rook a7, then maybe the game is just a draw already, right? That may well be the case. But I mean, technically with 3 extra pawns, you know, yeah, I imagine you're looking for some way to have the advantage. But I think bishop f5 was very strong find by Concord, and I don't see any way for black to win. It looks like a draw to me now, but I haven't like really struggled and pushed myself to find some kind of something for black, you know? Like I haven't looked at bishop e6, for example. I hadn't pushed myself to do that yet, right? That's that level, right? They can't do it. It's pushing yourself, right? It covers rook c8, but the king can take. So I don't think it works. But my point is I haven't yet like looked for these kind of things. I haven't really tried. I noticed rook f5 as a move. I didn't think it was a way to defend c7, so I didn't look at it deeply, but I could look at it harder. You know, I don't know. I don't really see anything for black to do here. But let me answer Marshall's question. So Marshall, I assume you've got a pretty good repertoire of tactical ideas. You might know some ideas like if you've got a knight on e7 against a castled king, you can play queen h7 check, king takes h7, rook h1 checkmate with a false back rank using your knight on e7. You can probably calculate some variations like at the beginning of this game that I was talking about, like in this position here, you can probably calculate some moves like knight takes e5, attacking d5. You see that black can either take on e5 and lose a pawn, or they can counterattack with knight c3 and then a bunch of captures come. You're probably not perfect at calculating those series of captures, but you understand that that can be done. You can look at the first 2 or 3 moves deep, and you've got some idea what you're trying to do there. Those calculations get difficult for lots of players, but you could start doing it. So what you need is something. You need a better sense of when there are tactics in the position. You've got a decent ability to see some tactics. If I told you there's a tactic, you could maybe find it. So what I would recommend to you is that you try to develop the alert system for tactics. So I'll find you a video that I recorded on this subject. Oh, no, that's the wrong video. Hang on. This video is designed to help you create for yourself and replicate basically an alert or warning system I have. You know how they've got alerts for when, you know, a tsunami might come or a hurricane might come or things like that, right? So I've got like I innately or whatever have a warning system that goes off when I think my opponents might have a tactic or I think I might have a tactic. And I came up with a way to think about that and for other players to train themselves to have that same alert system. So try that video. I think it's the right thing for you. You asked for a tip. I think that's the right level and the right, yeah, or an air raid siren or something like that, right? They test this emergency broadcast system in some places, you know, once every week for like 1 minute, Wednesday at noon or Tuesday at noon or something like that, right? So I have a similar alert that goes off when I think there are tactics. You don't have that yet, Marshall. So this video is designed to give it to you. Okay, so what did black choose to do? They chose to save the A pawn, give this pawn, tuck the king. Their plan is if white gives a bunch of checks to bring the bishop to f7 to block the checks. Now, is there any plan to avoid rook a7 winning back this pawn? Maybe... Yeah. If rook a7, king f6 was played, by the way, as somebody guessed. If rook a7, bishop b1, you're going to get check, here, check, here, check, here, check, here, check, and the king slips out now without the white rook on c8. Right? So, yeah. So a6 is interesting. White can't just go hunt down that pawn, but white plays king f6, basically just threatening mate. And things don't look easy for black. I guess rook h6 should at least avoid mate, though. Another Friday, another FNF. There we go. We get the check. Now, if black saves the rook this way, the pawn on h7 goes, right? White equalizes the pawns, and it looks pretty drawish. It doesn't feel like white's in a lot of danger of viral stigma, so I'm kind of with you on that. But I think black doesn't think they're in big danger either, so they're, you know, really trying to press as hard as they can here. Rook h2 played. Okay. So as I see it, white could maybe go for king f6, but they played f4. Is that white playing for win, being ambitious? Against king f6, did black have anything other than repeating? f4. Yeah, so viral stigma has some concern for black's king being trapped in the back rank. It looks impossible to play. I agree. It now feels like there's just no good scenario for black. King h8, bishop g8 to try and keep the game going, yeah. Yeah, there's basically no hope for black winning. I see what viral stigma means. Yeah, I think black thought, you know, I can't lose. It's true with good moves, black should never lose, but I guess the other question to ask yourself, is there any scenario where you win? And really there isn't, you know? Marshall, no, 35 is not too old to improve. What you have to understand, though, Marshall, and anyone else who's over 35 and wants to improve, is that I don't know exactly when it happens, and it probably varies by person, right? But somewhere between age 30 and age 40, some of your cognitive abilities already start to decline a little bit. There's no hard biological fact preventing you from improving. But your improvement needs to outstrip your disimprovement. You see what I mean? Like, you just have to understand you're already at a point where you're losing some things, right? Where if you learn an opening, you might forget it faster, right? Or where your calculation might be slowing down a little bit compared to how it was 10 years before, or the rate at which you absorb new material might be slowing down, or how well you integrate it into the knowledge you already have, right? When you learn a new plan in a certain pawn structure, your brain might misplace a file somewhere in, it might not log all 4 plans in about the same pawn structure in the same place. It might log like the minority attack here and, f3, e4 here, and plop your knight on e5 here. So there are some things that are starting to get harder, starting to slip away, some skills that are getting less good. So you have to out race that, right? You have to do more improving. But then, like a lot of the thing about why there's prodigious improvement for young people compared to older people is that young people don't have other responsibilities, bills to pay, families to look after, etc. Right? How much time do you spend on chess, Marshall, right? An adult who's just completely obsessed with chess might spend 10 hours a week on chess, which to some of us might seem like a lot. But when I was in high school, I was probably doing 60 hours a week of chess. So again, that would be hard for most adults to compete with in terms of, rate of improvement and so forth. Okay, bishop f7 was played. I was thinking of that move. Bishop g4. Boxing out the rook a little bit. Some ideas of maybe bringing the pawn to f6, and then you can go on the attack, because the king wants to get out of here this way. Wow, congrats, Crunchy. H5, just looking for breathing room for that king. Bishop d3, still looking for this move. Black plays rook b2 because now that they've played h5, if king f6, black no longer has rook h6 check, right? The pawn's blocking the rook's access to the third rank. So the rook switches sides to be able to defend its king from incursions by white's king. So white's king's not going to be able to do this job of sort of checkmating the black king against holding the king to the back rank in order to checkmate. So white needs the pawn here. So white moves the bishop, preparing the pawn. I could see black trying to harass this bishop to try and keep white from finishing the plan, but note that white is also threatening to just clean up this pawn, which is, one less hope or asset for black for sure. Alexander points out that against rook g2, king h6 now looks nasty because the rook can't get here, can't get here. King f6 looks just as good as king h6 to me, Alexander. I don't know if you calculated a specific difference, but this also has back rank mate threatened, plus the king may threaten this in some cases. I mean, obviously chess is sort of all mental, Dabo, but you mean that people feeling that they're slowing down is just their attitude, not their actual mental capabilities? mean, and if like Aronian told you that he just can't calculate as fast as he could 5 years ago, you just wouldn't believe him. You'd think he's just buying into what other people told him to expect at his age, and it's not real. Salah deep in thought. The mind is strong. I agree, but the mind is also, partially biological, right? And there are limits to all biological thingamajiggies. I don't think there was anything wrong with your move, Alexander. King H6. King F6 also looked good. I was just checking if you had seen a difference. When I see a little heart in the YouTube chat, does that mean that somebody like put a like on our stream or something? Because every now and then over the YouTube chat, a little heart will just kind of flutter up. If you believe you are slower, guess what? You'll be slower. I understand there's self-fulfilling ideas, Dabo, but then there's also things which would happen whether or not you believe them, right? Like you might also believe you're faster, but not be. Okay, I just saw one more heart, so I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to refresh it and see if it ticked up by a heart. It ticked down by a heart. Okay, so it's just a chat emote thing. Gotcha. Okay, rook b3 is the move. Challenging the bishop, that's what I expected. And I don't see a reason not to just grab it away. Oh, now I see all kinds of little faces flying around in the chat. That's cool. Oh, now the check. If you go for the checkmate, there's rook g6. And there goes the counterplay. So that puts white on a timer to checkmate black's king, right? Here he comes. Very strong play from Salah. The counterplay's coming. Rook g6 is available for now. White, we need the bishop on d3 here, diagonal, to make progress by covering g6, but the rook's covering d3, so it's very slow to get the bishop into position to do anything new here. Strong play, I would have to say. You had an opponent resign by surprise, Courtney? Surprise resignation. It does happen now and then. Online, there's a small chance, which you don't get in OTB terms, there's a small chance online, if someone resigns in a good position, that they just had to go. And they thought, like, for them, that's the most polite thing to do. They don't want to beg you for a draw or ask you to resign or just abandon the game, so they just resign. That could happen occasionally in an online game. But the other main reason is sometimes people don't realize their position's good, you know? Sometimes they resign because they think that they are in trouble. And they're not. All right, Concord comes up with bishop f1. I'm not sure what the idea is yet. Then we get h3. That pawn's coming really soon. Is Concord going to sack the bishop for it? That would be wild, wouldn't it, Viral Stigma? If black really did manage to create some chances with that king trapped on g8. Incredible, that sequence that got the rook out and the h-pawn rolling. While just calculating every possibility for the white king. I had kind of expected, I didn't have a plan for white, but I vaguely thought the bishop might go to the long diagonal here. I was thinking maybe something like bishop b7, h3, bishop e4, and the bishop's on some good diagonals. But again, I thought after h2, black's counterplay is fast enough that you can break up the checkmates like this. You can't. You wanted bishop b7 too, Alexander, huh? So bishop b7, that's a funny variation, isn't it? Bishop e4, h2, king f6. Going back for the checkmate, and actually it's in time. Even this move, white takes and mates. So bishop e4, bishop g6, not pushing. That's a good move. Thanks, Kaylin. So now, wherever the king goes, black can trade the bishop and push h2. Yeah. White's taking some risk here, and here I guess there's f5. Yeah, I guess white can still draw with king e5. It doesn't matter too much. It should take a while to lose this. Oh no, there's rook g1. White loses. Wow. Okay. We can definitely still lose. Always possible. So bishop f1, h3. Rook c2, bishop g6. I can lose like that again. Gives it. Wow. White wants the pawn here and the king here, and like hoping to still keep the black king stuck. But yeah, amazingly, black now faces winning chances. This move, white can't play f5 because of bishop g6, I think. So you could push that king away a little bit. Pretty surprising, huh, Sigma? Pretty surprising that black managed to get such chances out of this. Wow. Very fine endgame play. Let me make sure I understood how it happened. Check and back. Okay, white could play king f6 with a repetition. They're kind of both playing for a win, which is part of what makes this endgame so exciting. When both players are really trying to win, then stuff happens. So this odd move to move the f-pawn, yeah, it just totally makes sense. I wonder if bishop e4 could have been a better move. Maybe black attacks it. No. Bishop e4, rook here, king here wins for white. No. The rook can block, huh? So maybe bishop e4 was nothing special. Rook comes around. Bishop d3. Preparing f5. Attacks the bishop. Here, check. Maybe here white should have played king h4. Kept the pawn under control. But black goes check. Defended. Defended. Pushed you back. Win the pawn. And again, you're on defense. What was this? Rook takes f7 is playable, you know, here. Should be easily a drawn endgame for white. No danger of losing. Grabs the pawn, this check. And yeah, and then the H pawn is dangerous. Black saying with the king here, f6, just king g6, doesn't matter. Stalling is not that amazing a resource to have. Welcome to the dojo, Lehman. I mean, potentially he could finish the game with time still on the clock. All right, cuts off the king to keep the king from getting out and attacking this pawn. The first step for black is to win that f5 pawn. Then you can try and checkmate with the rook and bishop. If we want to win that f5 pawn, the first step might be to get the bishop around somewhere like this, where it attacks the pawn from behind. And if they try and perpetual you, you can just sort of walk your king out eventually. Interesting, Alexander. I think technically there's no rule against the child stalling, and the TD's not allowed to, nor anybody allowed to, go harass the child. But if you're not too much of a stickler for the rules and you think about what's best for the culture, the community, the child, the tournament, and you do it in a very understanding and respectful way, I could imagine, you know, offering the kids some lesson of that type. Yeah. Oh, after the game was checkmated, gave him advice after. I thought you said, like, came and talked to him during his game. All right, so here it's just checks. Checks. The king can't hide on this side of the pawn, so we can check this king until it has to, like, basically abandon the pawn. Oh, no, it would just repeat, right? Yeah, so white's king doesn't care. It just goes back and forth. Yeah. Fair enough, Alexander. I mean, definitely talking to the kid about it after the game, very important, you know. We all need to get our education somewhere, right? So okay, so Stigma, what I'm thinking in a position like this is something like, you know, here, check, and you're saying rook g6, so maybe like this position, bishop here, rook g6, king here, here. So how I would make progress is I would attack this pawn with my bishop. And my threat is to at some point check the king, you know, force it either away from the pawn or to f4, then check again. So as soon as my bishop's here, I'm threatening to win this pawn. Oh, but look at this. Draw. Perpetual right here. We can check on all 3 squares defended by the king. And if they ever go to the e-file, rook e6 with a draw. Beautiful. I didn't see that coming, Byro. I might have to get my king out of dodge in advance, which I know is weird, but... maybe this move. The bishop can't go this way because you still have this. So you force it, you know, back like this. Maybe even keep going after it. Not easy. Yeah, it's not easy. Not easy at all. Let's see where their position is now. Long line, rook f1 played, rook g1, king f8, king e5. Now if you check, it looks like the king can safely go to f6. That's not the dream for black. White's very close to having the dream defensive formation, though. Did not expect white to still be okay here. Oh, Alexander says, give the checks with the rook. Place the black rook on f1 instead of e1. Then your king's allowed to cross the e file. And you can put your bishop on b1. Yeah, maybe so. Good idea, Alexander. Well, it's like a very, very tough endgame, this one. Rook here, so preparing this check at least. But white can maybe just wait for now. Rook check. Looks like this will force the king to g7. Since here you can keep checking him. But this, what's the idea? f6, king g6 does not help. Hey Marshall, you can only work on so many things at once, right? So if you're working on your tactics, you might not be able to work on multiple openings. You could try playing one new opening for a while, but if you tried to switch all your openings at once, it might be hard. maybe you're reading a book about strategy or some end game. So it can be a lot. But in general, you could probably get to 2,000 with a very limited repertoire, as you say. If you have ambitions of being a master at some point, that might require you to like diversify more. You know what I mean? Like when it's diversifying, it's really just the point is broadening your chess understanding by playing different types of position, right? King G7 here. In the short run, you maximize your results by getting as good as possible with the opening that suits you best and just spamming it millions of times. But if you look at more long-term development as a player, if you have the time to practice and study, and I don't know if you're 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, or 50 hours a week, kind of, but longer term, if you have the time to study and to work on things, you tend to get more improvement out of some more variety. Oh, very interesting, Dabo. You've started. So tell me, tell me how the games have gone vaguely. Tell me anything you can about the games. Did you play at knight odds or at rook odds in the end? Did you play white or black? Did you blunder things or have long games? How many hours per week is not necessarily good or bad, Budayan, but it speaks to how much improvement you can expect and how ambitious your study plan can be. Somebody with 14 hours a week can do more work than somebody with 8 or 9 hours a week, right? So they can be more ambitious, and somebody doing 30 hours a week can make an even much more ambitious training plan. So the amount of time that's good for you, depends on how much you enjoy it and what else you have to do in your life, Are you still finding time to sleep and prepare healthy food for yourself? $14 hours per week is definitely enough for a player at Marshall's level, like 16 to 1700. 14 hours per week is definitely enough for someone at that level to make some improvements in their game. Okay, so the bishop comes around and attacks the pawn from behind. King's going to come out. And start to cramp that black rook a little bit. The white rook a little bit while keeping white tied to this. King might want to come here, see if he can push the rook off. White wants to hold this pawn here. I can't yet tell if black can win the pawn or not. Normally you can always win the pawn with rook and bishop against rook. I mean, if the white king ever moves forward or anything, black can definitely take this pawn. So white can't improve the setup, but can white kick this rook off of here, run it out of space on this rank? You just go back here now. And then against king b6, the idea is rook a5. King d6, maybe give a check and come back. I hear you, Dabo. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into our chess performance level, right? There's knowledge, there's instincts, there's calculation. There's also, you know, patience and determination, stuff like that. So maybe that's what's being revealed as something you could work on. If you wanted to. Why did white go king f6? Why not harass the bishop endlessly? I don't know. So the rook got two dark squares that keep this pawn defended. This bishop can check if the king goes here, so white can't do this and look to keep getting ahead. So I think white's just going to mark time with this rook, so we'll see rook a5, etc. Bishop, normally a good piece in this kind of endgame, but here black's pieces look pretty good. So it's just another board, white to play. Bishop does have some ability to attack these pawns on dark squares. But frankly, you know, I feel like black's in good position, active pieces. Very risky to go for knight d2 trying to win this. I don't know that black needs to do that. Yeah, I didn't see that message before Zoom, Joe. Okay, white activates the rook. Oh, so it was white's turn here. So that explains for sure no knight d2. Rook here. Idea is maybe to box that king in on h8 so it can't join the game. Makes a lot of sense. Against f6, of course, there's a question what the plan is. I think rook d7 might be in the cards for white. Actually, maybe you could also surprise black with check here, vicious. I guess rook check saves. But, I mean, saves how much? We're threatening mate and the c-pawn, so it's still worse for black. So, f6 didn't look amazing there. What does look amazing? Could ignore what white's doing and play rook a2. Just be active with your own pieces. Not too much changed here. Black came here, cutting off the 5th rank. But now with the bishop not attacking the pawn, white can move the rook anywhere. Two deep endgames here. Just a second. The endgame is pretty difficult phase of the game, I would say. It's got multiple things in it. Not just technique, strategy, tactics, decision making, various things. Okay, king g6 played. So the king got out from in front of the pawn in dreams of eventually attacking the pawn or avoiding perpetuals at least. White has now skillfully cut the king off, and there's some thought of maybe advancing the pawn to f7 here. It's incredibly tough resistance so far from Be Conquered here. The danger is if you ever come here that maybe your king doesn't have that square. So rook a4 played, white thinking. White's still thinking, that's just my analysis, that f6 move. Just keeping the pawn in f5 makes sense to me instinctively, Viral Stigma. I don't even know why that's right, but that is my instinct. I don't know if it is right. And if it's right, I don't know why it's right. But Concord keeps it there. Both of these players could have repeated positions an hour ago, right? And they each wanted to win the game. I love it. I love it. What a good learning experience. Mm-hmm. So you're saying like this, like your king can stay around the pawn more. So it's good for your king. It's funny because here the bishop can target the pawn. If you put the pawn on f6, a lot of people would think, oh, it's on f6. The bishop can't attack it, so I can never get out attacked and lose the pawn. But when your pawn's on f6, they can cut your king off from the pawn by taking away light squares and chasing your king. Very interesting, huh? Bishop e4. Yeah, it's great fighting spirit, Crunchy. What would I do here? I see B Conquered already made the next move. What would I play? Just king back to f6, maybe? Yes, got one. Now against this move, I'm thinking, you know, shuffle the rook, maybe? Yes! I feel like Concord's playing so well that if I guess the same move as them, I feel very excited for myself. Okay, king d5. Defending the bishop so the rook can move on the d file and try and zugzwang us. Idea from the opponent is something like here, 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 and we can't stay on the e file. So then we get into this, but I'm not convinced that I can't just still defend f5, right? By switching over to this area. The far side, the lateral defense. So I think that's the idea of the king, is to force the rook off of this e file, take up territory with the rook, have this rook f2 option available, but I don't see how it beats white, even if accomplished exactly as they want to accomplish it. I think that's fair for you, Foos Chess, yeah. Okay, another game for Martin. B Conquered really thinking this one through. Well, Dabo, yes, that approach would make chess seem simpler. Is king g5 a simple draw now? Pawn is quick, and you have rook e4 ideas. So king e5. Would you go f6 against this move? Did you expect this one? Or something else? This is what you expected. Okay, so you were going to play f6. This was my plan in response, which I was thinking makes some trouble for white. You have to keep your rook on the bishop, I think, because of the idea of check and king takes. f7 looks bad. But maybe it's not even that bad. If rook f8, just rook e4. Oh man, Viral Sigma, very nice. Oh man, I really ought to watch out. You even told me that that was what you were planning to do, didn't you? In advance. You're like, king g5, f6 with rook takes e4 ideas. Rook takes e6, 1. I don't think I quite allowed rook takes e6. There wasn't anything on e6. Rook f1 played. Oh, king g7, king e7, rook e1 winning. Yeah. Oh my god. I don't know if I've given a single line tonight that wasn't a blunder. What a difficult endgame. Rook f1. Seems to keep the f-pawn pretty healthy. And maybe there's a weird idea of playing rook f4 to tie black up a little bit. No, the rook could always move away if the king stays. Okay, rook d2. So, looking to maybe go to f2 if the rook moves off of the file. If the king moves away, come here, rook g2, press the king against the h file. So it's a moment to be careful with white again. But again, to my eyes, you know, rook a1, rook f2, rook a5 is a defensive formation that black has not yet threatened to beat. I feel like white held that formation for a little bit earlier. And black eventually put the bishop on d5, rook on d2 to get the king forward a little bit. So I don't think black did anything against this that looked scary for white. Crunchy wondering if white could go king e7, kind of blocking this king away from here, and start rolling. Rook a2. So king e7 did get played. Now rook a2. Now if you play this move, you do get checked. Go somewhere here, here. f7 looks fine. Let's see if I blundered again, shall we? Here, I'm planning this. If rook takes, there's no longer mating material. And if bishop takes, I thought I had check, derailing the king from defending here. So I was planning here, here, and just pushing. And I thought that looked like a clear draw here. Let's see, we got moves in the game. Rook a2, f6. White goes for it. Rook check, king f8. Oh my goodness. I don't see a lot of moves for black that would prevent f7. I mean, we could give a certain number of checks, but probably the white king could go to g7 at this point. Plus, why not go to e7 and shoulder the enemy king, right? I think white picked the right time to start pushing this pawn. Goodness gracious. B Concord activated a really nice endgame defensive mode here. Looks drawish to me. Let's check the other game for a moment, which is here. So here, knight b6 was black's choice. Wow, trying to stop rook d7. And they spent a lot of time on that. Now there's a simple threat here. Durdev finds a tactical move. King here, king g8. So maybe just bring the rook back to d8 or c8. White goes to d8, kicking the knight. Rook c8 was also very logical, going after this pawn. Maybe more so, because the pawn can't run away as well as the knight can. I guess white's a little bit better, right? With the black king trapped and these pieces sort of active and trying to threaten black. So it should be black who's okay with a draw. And if we're okay with a draw, maybe knight c5 going after this pawn, feeling that you can certainly have good chances to draw the rook endgame. And that does turn out to be what black goes for. So bishop c5 doesn't look promising for white trading. So if white has something, it's going to have to be more complicated than that. Maybe sacking the e4 pawn. What would that be? Rook d5, there's rook a1 check, right? We can't just go like this because here, check. Here. This might be a clever move in some way. Yeah, that's interesting. Not clear who's better there. Right, that was my plan. Zoomjaw was knight d2, but there was king f4 and rook f1, king g4. There was nothing completely clear. What else could white try? I mean, I looked at f6, but it doesn't look right. This would be logical to get an outside passer against this and just stretch the knight, but there's back rank mate. So hard to allow that. Hard to just allow knight e4. Your structure starts to collapse, and then there's the back rank mate tempo. My kids also say oops. Okay, suggestion from Viral. Here. Hard to evaluate. I mean, first thought is black can take on c2 with no danger of losing. Second question is this king and pawn ending good or bad? Yeah, I don't see that as being at all promising for black. Sorry, for white. No chance of winning like that. Maybe white just has no chance of winning. And no way of defending the e-pawn. So actually white's got a... I had been thinking before that white was a little bit better, slightly more active with the pieces. Black king on h7. Now, not seeing anything good for white, so... Is there danger? What's the... I mean, I guess trading on c5 and rook d5, the rook and pawn ending would be the most likely to draw. The king and pawn ending we have to check, though. Did I check it? Yeah. Of course not. It's late. Leave it to me.
I'm sorry. I didn't walk with the dog out.
You got the dog out? Okay. Beautiful. Go lie down. I think the pin is not very promising crunchy because of this line with here and taking this pawn with check. There's no pin anymore, and white's kind of scrambling. The black king's a little bit bad, but there's a chance that white will lose a pawn here. I didn't prove it before, because like I tried these tactics and they didn't quite win for black. So I didn't prove that black was good. Yet, there's other moves here. Maybe it's equal. I don't know. It didn't feel very promising to me. White trades. Okay. We'll see. Feels like the follow-up should be this rook d5 move. I'm having trouble calculating. So tired. The king and pawn ending looks bad for white. I'm afraid it might lose to go rook d5. Takes, king g8, king f2, king f8, king e3, king e7, king e4, king d6, and then black just wants to go f6 followed by king e5. Yeah. Rook d2 is plausible. I don't know if it's completely easy. You get the passive rook versus the active rook, right? And then black can either go g6, trying to bust out, walk the king around, or play h5, king h6, king g5. Maybe h6, h4 doesn't really get your king out and is the least, or h5, h4 is the least promising or likely to do something. I may have put them on top of the dresser. I think just to have them not stepping on them, but I can come look at what I've done. White hasn't moved yet. So Stigma, I'll show you on the board what I was concerned about. It was the black king coming to d6 and then c5. Maybe if you do this instead of bringing your king, you can just hold the black king at bay. But then there's also this angle of like king f6, g4, e4 here. That's a draw. Yeah, I was initially thinking, you know, king, 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 king. And that seemed pretty risky to me. I guess we could go one step. And now c4, king here, here. King here, here. You have to wait till the black king's here for this move to be really powerful. King f6 already loses to d6? Oh, because you recapture on d6. You don't play the... I kept thinking this would be what was risky for black. But you can just do this and freeze. g6, g4. h5, h3. That's actually a little funny. I haven't quite seen this pattern exactly like this, I don't think. I mean, the basic pattern, this one, of course, I've seen a couple versions of it. But this, trying to break out and just holding the pawn on f5 and then Zugzwang. Interesting. Okay, so rook d5 is playable. White plays rook d2. Rook e2 goes passive. Our other game did end in a draw. Bravo to both players on this epic game. So we last saw it here. King e6 pushes. Bishop g6 checks the king away. This is where I was planning to just play this move, I think. But I hadn't looked at this. Maybe that's why white was unsure about it, but looks still looks safe for white. But in the game, white now checked the king away, then comes back and defends the pawn. Beautiful. Beautiful defense, yeah. Be Conquered rejoins chat. Yeah. Epic endgame. Opponent didn't just want to draw. Your opponent also avoided a draw in the end game. You were both playing for a win, as far as I could tell. That's what made the end game such a fight. You definitely tried very hard, Fischer Seb, but so did your opponent. Okay, so this one here, the rook went passive, but white's king is coming out into the center. Doing some defense, giving the rook some chances now. I don't remember which opening. Martin, your first game is black. I did see the beginning of this game. So you're saying I should have played e6 instead of b6. So you mean play like this instead of like that, and bring the bishop out this way. You know, I don't actually know. I'm not I'm not any kind of expert on this. I know white could take b takes or d takes here. I don't know if you have to make any move with these yet. You could also play knight f6 castles first, maybe. You defended that rook and bishop versus rook very well, I thought. Be conquered. Asking about 33 f4. I don't see what the difference is, be conquered. I mean, with one pawn left, you're not threatening to win here. If engine says 33 f4. Yes, the engine is right about everything now, but 33 f4. I don't know. I don't know. So black now avoids repeating somehow. And this game goes on. The rook can finally get out. And I'm going to have to crash. There's some kitchen cleaning to do before bed. classic endgame over here too. This one is like a really, really classic endgame. Rook in 3 versus rook knight in 2 like this. Very tricky endgame. I actually had it once in a tournament against a GM. And I've studied it once, not in a tournament, you know, but I had studied it once just, you know, with friends, practicing it. Reading about it in a book. But now, no more books for me tonight. No more studying. I have blundered through this analysis session. But as usual, we have a good time, whether I'm sharp or dull. Thanks particularly to Viral Stigma for assisting with the analysis all night. And, of course, to everybody else for participating. Those of you who played for giving us a show, those of you who watched for giving us comments and questions and analysis. I wish you all a good night or good day, depending on where you are. And let me head off. Let me head off and do a little cleaning and hopefully get to bed soon. Yeah. Cheers, cheers, cheers.